I'm Teresa Caraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. My topic today is Charles Eisenstein, Follies and Fallacies. I am not going to be looking at why I suspect that he's paid to control the opposition, although I'll link a couple of articles in which I do that. I seem to be on a roll right now, offending some of the people who I like the best. And I think I've reached my conflict limit for the day. So I'm going to focus instead on why I believe that what he's saying isn't helpful for us in terms of both the ideology and the economic plan. And I'll be looking at a talk that he gave in Taiwan that has 9 different steps, and then also looking at sacred economics, which I hadn't looked at for the last 13 years or so, since it came out when I had done an interview of him, and also when I met with him one time at a talk that he gave. So I want to look at it again from this vantage point and look at the solutions that he proposes. I do think it's useful to have a systematic process to analyze whether someone is more or less likely to be paid to be controlling the opposition. Things that I look at are family and work backgrounds. Particularly, were they raised in an ideology that looks at supremacy and practices deception not only as permissible, but as required in order to protect that group? Are they someone who went to elite universities? Do they have associations with people who are known to be in the intelligence industry? And then I look at the things that they say and whether they have been caught in lies, whether they have used and usurped other people's ideas and twisted them in a different way, whether they have used rhetorical tricks in order to distract their audience. So I'm going to be looking at some of those. Now, why? Why is it important to figure that out? What joins my whole circle is that we did not fall for a particular psyops that shall not be mentioned on YouTube. But we really failed. For everyone who did not submit to the medical procedure, we ended up suffering the social consequences, whatever those were, and they have been severe for many people. And for those who did, that has been the majority, and the damage is done. They got away with whatever it was they intended to do. And we know that they have not stopped there. So in order to use our credibility to avert or to leverage the next thing coming, we need to figure out what that is. So when we know that someone is actually being paid to control the opposition, we can work backwards from there and figure out what is the next psyop. How are they trying to fool us? It is a gift whenever you know that about someone, because then it is a clue as to what the agenda is. I went back to the very first essay that made Charles Eisenstein a key player in this space. That was called the Coronation. And in it, looking at it from this perspective, what he's saying is, well, there are a lot of conspiracy theorists who are talking about this as a great evil cabal and how this was all planned in order to usher in the next New World Order. But that's not really what it was. It's a conspiracy with no conspirators. This is really a civilizational tilt. Something that is inevitable because of human nature, and that we have been heading towards this, and that it is really systems and ideologies that are to blame. Now, you know me. Systems and ideologies is exactly what I talk about. But I don't think that leaves the evil cabal off the hook. This is something that has been put in place, And that seems to me a distraction. He also talks about, in later ones, he has one where he is anti-Semite because he says that the anti-vaxxers are the new Jews and that those doing this to them are like the Nazis. So once again, very similar to Matthias Desmet, the people who are saying, oh, this is just us rushing into our chains, and it is because we are gullible, because we need to change ourselves. We don't need to look for any group of people that's doing this to us. Oh, that's always an easy thing to do. We want to see good versus evil, but really that's not the case. We need to look within. I find that suspicious. One of his essays is called The Conspiracy Myth, and he continues this motif in his Taiwan talk at the Crossroads. The first snippet is Science as Myth. He talks about how science has been revealed to be merely magic rituals, and then talks about all the bogus things that we all realize that these face garments really didn't protect us, and all the different studies and how we learned that really none of that was valid. Now, I don't know about you, but I know that I learned more about biology and virology during those years than I ever had in my life. I was studying and reading, and I was refuting, and I was analyzing scientific studies and showing why their studies were bad science. That didn't mean that science didn't exist. I will attach a video that I made before I was doing Substack, and it responds to Paul Kingsnorth. And I use his thesis, antithesis, synthesis model and show how we were the ones who actually did believe in the science, and they were the ones who were not following the correct procedures. In that, I quote one scientist who says that science is a process of understanding by taking certain steps, and those are the ones that we were following. So I don't think it serves us at this point to say, oh no, science is just magic. Part 3, he calls Capitalism Won't Destroy Itself. But by the end of it, he gets to a curious statement, which is that capitalism won't save us from ourselves. So he is looking at us and our impulses to want to have convenience and comfort and not be giving to other people and taking care of each other's kids. That is really the problem, and capitalism isn't going to save us from doing that. Instead of having a system in which that is actually calibrated and we do have a way of exchanging services with each other rather than do your job and then on the side take care of other people's kids. That's what my system sets up, not his, in which he just says, oh, the problem's you and capitalism isn't going to save you. Part 5 is when logic gets in the way. So he's looking at logic as something that is counterproductive. But I remember that being the only tool. What were you going to do is say, oh, I just emotionally don't really feel good about all this. That's what they were trying to position us as. People who were scared, people who just needed to grow up and learn how to take a little jab in the shoulder. That's not what we were talking about. And logic was the thing that we used relentlessly to show people why what we were saying was right. Now you're going to abandon logic when the facts have come in your favor? Part 6 is valuing all sources of knowledge. And in that he says, well, if other people are just dealing with the empirical level of data, maybe they're just not ready for the next experience. He ends by talking about the breakdown of consensus reality and how, even though science has failed us, magic is the new science, and things that could no longer be healed with science can now be healed with magic, and that gives us hope. Now I'd like to go back to sacred economics and the solutions and system changes that he proposes in the back. The first one is negative interest. What he says is that money kept in banks should lose value. I think that's what we're at, with a very severe level of consequence. What he's saying is that unless you put your money at risk, if you're just storing it, it should lose value so that you have to recirculate it, and that's going to solve wealth redistribution. The second is elimination of economic rents and payment for depletion of the commons. What he means by that is having less income taxes and more tax of property, so the Georgian land use taxes, and that is going to be a way that as wage earners become more desperate, as he says, they'll welcome more taxing of the property. I taught an online course in Georgian economics, and I still have to say it's never made sense to me that having the rich be taxed and therefore have the use of that property goes in the opposite direction from having the people take back the land and be able to use it for themselves and their own productivity. The third is internalization of social and environmental cost. By that, what he means is cap and trade auctions so that polluters are having to pay for it. And I think by now we know how that goes. He says that as waste is eliminated, people will start sharing cars and tools, and they'll live in smaller houses, or if they have a large house, it will house extended families and maybe more than one. So that sounds a lot to me like you will own nothing and be happy. 4 is economic and monetary localization. This, of course, is what I'm all about. But what he says is it will be driven by the high cost of energy, and as the national dollar fails, people will step in with local governments to create their own currencies. He doesn't actually say how that's going to happen. That's not a part of his plan. It's just, they're going to be forced to do this, and so they will, and that'll be a good thing. No problem. I don't think that works. 5 is the social dividend, by which he means universal basic income. So people will be freed from the necessity to work, and they will work because they want to, not because they have to. How will this be funded? Through things like demurrage fees. So when they take the value of the money you have stored in a bank, they will give that to all the people who are not working. And then it'll be funded with pollution fees and fees for using the social commons. So in other words, those commons that you no longer have access to unless you pay. 6 is economic degrowth. Isn't that another way of saying recession? He says that 20% of people are unemployed in industrial countries. Why not have everyone just work 20% less? And that will just redistribute, and we really don't need to be consuming as much. So with our lesser consumption needs, it's okay that we're just not going to have as much money, because what good is it to have it in a bank when it's just going to lose value? So somehow the money losing value is going to create this system where the poor and middle classes end up having more. And his last is his signature, the gift economy. It's up to you. You need to be doing more for your neighbors, feeding them, taking care of their kids, providing housing for them. That's how we really should be, and it has nothing to do with those bankers and their accelerating mortgages and how they tweak things so that the insurance companies are now not even covering people when they burn their houses down. But that's just me speaking as a conspiracy theorist. Surely a myth. And for more showing that I'm a crazy science mythologist, here's Are We Being Manipulated on Paul Kingsnorth, and this is Deep Fakes, Eisenstein and RFK. Thank you for watching.